Hello, hello. I got like just hit by this need to say this, so this will probably be a bit of a quickie, but I really wanted to put something out about this piece and at least start talking about it. So welcome. I see a bunch of people who are kind of hopping on while I start talking here. So as always, even though I think this will probably be a little bit of a shorter one, though, again, I always say that and then I talk. And frankly, I'm procrastinating one of my children's school applications. So that could make for a longer Facebook Live. But yes, welcome. I see so many faces I recognize and names, and please feel free to bring any of your personal shares in relation to what I say, your questions for either clarification, if I didn't speak clearly enough, or I also love questions that are like, okay, that makes sense in the abstract, but what does that mean? Like, how would I do that in my real life in this circumstance? Or how does that apply here? So all interactions welcome. I love having the dialogue, and thank you for being here with me. So I want to bring forward this idea of why it's important to let, and I put him kind of in these brackets because while I'm sure that this is relevant, well, frankly, I know this is relevant to all people, and the place that I hear this complaint come from is women who date men. I am sure, and I think, frankly, that's probably just like a large segment of the people who come and ask me questions. So I by no means mean to say this doesn't apply for women who date women, men who date men, men who date women. But I get this complaint, or this, really what I get is this desire. I hear from women who come to me, and they tend to be women who date men. And they're like, why doesn't he lead me? Or I want him to lead me more. How do I get him to lead our relationship? These are sort of all variations on this question that I get, or it comes as this complaint like, he never leads. I have to do everything. How else? Like I have to tell him what to do all the time. I have to, right? So those are the ways it comes, right? And what I hear underneath that is this real like longing. And I want to put this caveat, which is that I'm not saying this is the way a relationship should be, or that women should be led by men. Frankly, I don't want to say I don't care. Like, I care about you, but like there's part of me is like, I do not give two shits about the kind of relationship you want to have. I want to support you in having the one you want to have. And I get enough women who come to me and say, I want a relationship in which my man takes the lead, that I want to answer this question. If you don't want that, then like, by all means, let me know what you do want, and I'll see if I can support you, or like, and if you have it, great. But if you're in this dynamic, and again, you could be a man who wants the woman you're dating to lead. You could be a man who wants the man you're dating to lead, a woman who wants the woman you're dating to lead. So if you are a person who's in that dynamic of like, oh, I wish they would take the lead more often, and this could be sexually, this could be making plans. This could be, it's like in all, like just taking kind of charge of your family. Like, there's so many ways that this could play out, right? But that sense of, I want that person to take the lead more often. If you're in that position, it's really important. And I'm just going to use him again, because that's the way it comes to me, and for ease of speaking. You've got to let him do it badly. And what I mean by that is, if this is something that you really want as like a more ongoing dynamic in your relationship, right? There's like the moment or the moments, and there's the thing you want in the moment. And then there's this bigger picture, which is what's the dynamic that you want to cultivate? And if you want to cultivate a dynamic, ultimately, you need to be more committed to the dynamic than to the moment. So I'm going to pause for a moment and say, and kind of backtrack a little bit and say, you may need to be discerning about the moments that you make that decision, right? There's some moments where it's like what happens in the moment is really important. And it doesn't mean just do what he says all the time. But if your partner is floundering or trying to take the lead and kind of not doing it right, because frankly, often they don't, or they don't know what's like exactly the right thing, or can you be willing in that moment to give up what you want in the moment, like getting it just right, in service of the dynamic, which is like, oh, this is the thing, this is the dynamic I want him to take on more often. So I'm going to support the dynamic over the specificity of exactly the way I want it. So I want to check in here. Rachel said, it just occurred to me that I think my husband wants me to lead more in certain areas. Could totally be true. I mean, first you can always check. But frankly, I definitely lead in certain areas of my relationship, or in areas of other relationships I have with men. So it's really not like it's not a man-woman thing. And I hear this a lot from women, like this like longing, like, please, could he just take the lead? And that actually requires us to, number one, relax the part of us that leads, because we could do it all the time. If you know what you want, you could always just tell him exactly how to do it, and then you'll get the thing you want, but you won't get the dynamic. How can I say this? For starters, I would say that it would be a useful perspective to take on, that whatever the dynamic you have in your relationship is the one that you've created. And, the other person too, but also you. And we don't get leadership from the other person by bringing leadership ourselves. That role is filled. Like, as long as I'm leading, that role is filled. And it doesn't actually, first of all, just doesn't create space for the other person, or again, like him, I say in quotes, but there's actually no space for him to there's no void to step into. And I'm thinking, my mind is just going to a billion different places. I'm going to see if I can keep myself a little bit focused here today. But one example was a woman I worked with who's super successful, mother of two, wife, and she was just complaining. She was just ranting to me about how her husband still doesn't know where the lunch boxes live. And I was like, yeah, because every time he asks, you tell him. So he doesn't have to know. And what you really want, so like in the moment you think, oh my God, I have to tell him the lunches will never get made, we won't get there on time, and then, for years now, you've been resenting him for not knowing, but you give him the answer every time he asks. And I know on the surface, this could just look like playing dumb, which is a step back for women. And there's one piece of that, but it's actually deeper than that. There's this internal actual relaxation of making the thing happen. And it's energetic. It's totally energetic. I said, next time he says like, oh, where are the lunch boxes? Like literally you have to go in and relax the part of you that's going to answer. Like let it lie down. When I do this, part of it is I literally have to soften It's like the whole front of my body, I just soften. And I intentionally, not because I'm fucking stupid, because I'm not, but I intentionally go spacious. I don't want to say vacant, but I actually go spacious. And I said, the next time that happens, like, you know, you got to do the work inside yourself, and then just say, like, I wonder where they are. And then wait. Because I promise he will figure it out. He'll ask your kids, he'll find them, he'll realize he actually does know, but you've trained him to not have to remember. So that's one example. And I want to pause and just check here because I've seen a couple of comments come in. Nathan said, yes, if you pick at someone's shortcomings, it doesn't foster confidence. So that's one piece, like the confidence piece for sure. And I also just think of it as like roles, and we're not even meant to play our roles all the time. But the only reason that, like sports, for instance, I mean, these are weird examples for me to use because I'm not super into sports, but I think about like baseball, and I think about like there's a batter and a pitcher and a catcher and a third baseman and a first baseman. And like, if I'm the pitcher, but I'm trying to also be the catcher, like the game just isn't, it just gets weird. It's not really as fun. Or if I'm the pitcher, but I also like am constantly running and doing the first baseman's job, first baseman's like, why the fuck am I here? He's going to get lazy on the job because the pitcher like is always there for him. And so it's like, oh, there are times when I want the capacity to be in this role or this role. And so it actually is useful to tease them apart and be willing to like fully inhabit a role, the role of the one leading, the role of the one following, in order to even have choice around that. And frankly, and again, I'm going to kind of talk he, she, because that's the way it comes to me. And I do also see this cultural piece, which is that as women, like we have very much picked up the leadership role, and we take it on at work, and we take it on in our families, and we take it, and it's like, man, I can just manage the shit out of all of this. And I, you know, seriously, I mean, I'm as guilty as this, as the next woman. And so I can use myself as an example, but is, you know, my partner right now, when he comes in, he's guaranteed to not do it as well as I can, because I've been doing it longer and I do it alone a lot. And I, you know, like I know where all the lunch boxes are. And so again, it's this piece of actually letting him do it not as well as I think it should be done, in service of supporting, yeah, he's going to do that more often. And then Jordan said, I missed the conversation so far, but the title really resonates with me. The self-critical, shamed part of me is really sensitive to non-constructive criticism when I've taken the lead. Yeah, so that's like a really tricky part. This is a great comment, Jordan. And one is, so I'm going to make just totally shameless plug. This is hard. And it's one of the reasons why I think that people should come to the Art of Fearless Intimacy with John Wineland and myself, because we give actually a safe container for practicing these, inside which there's a lot of like we're holding all the space, and anything that comes up, we can work with and facilitate. So when you're just together and you have all your history of how it's happened, and, you know, she always complains in this way, or she just says one thing and you take it as all the criticism that frankly probably goes back to your mother, and, you know, suddenly it's like, how do we even get here? Everything's awful. I was just trying to help. And so, I mean, I really believe that we create one of the most incredible containers to come and really take on what I think is deep and powerful and challenging work, and then create space where it can all be worked with and where we can really support people. So this is something that resonates, and there's challenges around it, like come, because what we do there is really good. Anyway, shameless plug aside, is a whole other Facebook Live to do, and around like how to actually give feedback in that space. Most of it should actually have almost no words. That's the most helpful. But for the purposes of this one, I want to say most of it is the internal work. the willingness to actually take on the internal stance of, I don't know. If you're the one wanting more leadership from the other person. If you don't want that, I'm not saying this is how women should be or that you need to do this, any stretch of the imagination, but if something you're desiring from your partner is that they really step in and take the lead, is to actually come from the stance of celebrating every time they take the lead, even if they do it wrong. Part of that is literally this energetic, and it's physical. It takes actually a physical relaxation, an energetic relaxation that goes like, I don't know. And then allows that person to be like, well, where do you think we should go? And then there's praise. So that's the piece I hear you speaking to, Jordan, which is like, so one of the things, this little like pro tip, one of the things I have trained myself to do is, I do this with men and women, but I swear, like, the men in my life love it. Whether they know I'm doing it or not, they love it. Is anytime, and I do this with men that I work with, that I collaborate with. I do this with my boss. I do this with my partner. And it's like magic, is that they'll come with an idea. And the first words out of my mouth are, what I love about that idea is, or like, oh my God, what I love about what you just said is, or what I love about that is that you had an idea, right? Like, you can't be condescending about it, but really, like, train yourself to look for, like, God, what I love about that is like ... And if you really come from that stance, you can even say almost the exact opposite afterwards, and it's taken really, really well. So that's like super high level pro tip, because it actually takes this internal stance where you can't be like, oh, that was the stupidest idea, but what I love about it is that you're not totally lame. You have to actually love it, and love that they came with an idea, and like love, and that's this energetic inner work too, which is again why, frankly, working inside held containers is really valuable. So let me check in again here. Nathan said, and if you're picking at someone, then you're taking up leadership space. Totally. That is exactly the piece, Nathan, which is that you're saying you know how to do it better. So almost like regardless of the thing, you're literally taking the lead and saying like, I know how to do that. I know how you should do this better than you do. Totally. So it's not the dynamic. And I want to say here, this is hard. I want to, like, it doesn't mean that you can't do it or that you shouldn't do it, but it is hard, like, to truly choose. It's a choice. It's totally a choice. But to choose, I am going to foster the dynamic over fostering the specificity of getting exactly what I want right now. Because I could make that happen and lose the dynamic, or I can foster the dynamic and maybe not get like exactly. And sometimes you will get exactly what you want, or you'll get something better. This is like slightly off point, but I think it's a valuable example. This is about a year, actually it's almost 2 years ago now, with my current partner, that I got an email from him, and it was some things that he was upset about. And instead of my first response being like, why didn't you bring these up in person? I genuinely felt this, but it took some practice. Because of course I was like, oh, I wish he'd just talk to me about this in person. Or there might be a place to defend a little bit something. And instead of any of that, I wrote him back immediately. And I just said like, oh my God, I love that you wrote me this email. I'm so excited that you shared these things with me. One thing was actually like, he was like, I don't think you should be doing this. It was super directive about my life. And I was thrilled. I was like, oh my God, he's telling me what to do. Like, this is so exciting. But again, that's what I want. If you don't want that, don't worry about it. But if you do want it, you've got to like really in those moments, even if it is a little off, just like, oh, like, thank you for bringing that. And another one, so this was kind of like, my partner brought something recently where I did have a different idea, and I was like, well, what about that? And I really took time, like I took a couple breaths and I sat back and I just listened for a while. And again, it's this internal relaxation piece. And I really stopped before I brought anything, because it would be so easy to bring it as like, well, have you thought about this? Or why didn't you think about this? Or what? And they're completely valid questions. It's not that you should never have any questions or follow blindly or not have your own opinions. But he was bringing a huge thing to me that's a plan for our lives. And it was like the amount that he put into it was extraordinary. So I really stepped back and I was like, wow, I know that you put so much time and energy and research into this. And I'm so curious why you chose this over this. I was like, I know that you have really good reasons for everything you chose. And I'm so curious why you chose this over this. And I had to sit back to get genuinely curious, rather than like, why would you choose that over that, right? Which has the subtle criticism, even though I'm asking the question. Okay, got to reorient myself because I went a little rogue here, but let me just check in about comments again. Oh, it's so fun to see all your faces and your names, and hello. Evelyn said, when you praise him for a crappy job, how do you get him to still improve? Because crisps and fake chicken pieces in a lunchbox is a great first step, but it's not great. I'm anxious that when I praise, he thinks it's enough. Whew, yeah, that's such a big, it's such a big fear, and it's a valid one. There is really this piece of like, I think we even do this to ourselves, right? We're like, if I don't criticize myself, how will I ever get better? So it's really important to praise in specificity. Like, oh, like, thank you so much for making the lunches ahead of time. Or like, what the thing really is. And then, some things fall outside this realm. Sometimes it's important to set up a separate conversation for things. And so be like, oh, I really want to talk about, I really want to have a conversation about how we feed our children. And I'd love for us to like really dialogue about how we feel about this together. When's a good time for you? And this is one of those tricky things too. There really is like a male and female biology. And then there's the masculine and the feminine, they intersect, and, it gets super confusing. But I find that men more often than women have a harder time being surprised by a conversation. So it's like, where often we'll just start the conversation. Like, so we really need to talk about the lunch right now. And I think da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And we're like halfway down the thing, and they're just like still at, wait, we're having a conversation right now? I didn't even know that was happening. So this is a total side note, but that's just a setup piece. So there's still this complete room to like, hey, I really want to talk about, if I want to come to some decisions about how we're going to feed our children, like, when's a good time for us to talk about that? But what you're saying, Evelyn, the piece that I really want to speak to there is this piece of like, don't make shit up. It's important that the praise be true. But there is, inside of that, I would say there's almost always, 99.9% of the time, there's something that is, you can genuinely praise. So shifting back to the original piece, just want to really underscore this piece of how important it is to let so the other piece I want to say, and this isn't like personal to you, Evelyn, but your comment brings it up, which is for all of us who are the ones in the role of desiring to be led, whoever you are, is to notice how often we'll come up with examples where it won't work, rather than all the times when it can. And we'll take the moments, because there is some discernment. There are genuine moments to just be like, this got to happen right now. Like, I don't care who's leading, I don't care who's falling, but like, shit's got to happen. And there actually is a way it's got to happen. There are genuine moments in life like that. And we will sabotage this by pretending like, I'm going to let him lead. In one of these actual pivotal moments, he'll do it badly. We'll be like, see, like, can't handle that shit. And I had to take it over because it was really important. And now I know for sure I can't trust him to do that, or he never blah, blah, blah. So don't choose those moments. Like, that's on us. And I'm trying to think of like a genuine moment like that. But there are things that we're not willing to have go not well. And that could be the nutrition of our children. But it could be getting them to school on time. But I also think like it's interesting to notice the times that we think it has to happen when actually, you know what, I was again working with another woman, and she was talking about like, well, what about when every time we get in the car and he doesn't, you know, he's like, where are we going? Or what are the directions? And number one, again, like you have, if he does that every single time you get in the car, you have absolutely trained him to do that. And you either have to choose that you're going to be the one who holds that in your relationship, which is a perfectly fine choice, but then stop resenting it, or train differently and be willing to deal with the consequences. And I thought like like, again, I mean, this might not be 99.9%, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's like 80% of the time. 80% of the time, if you're going somewhere together, the worst case scenario is you don't get there and no one dies. Like the worst case scenario is you're like, I don't know. I thought you knew where we were going. Like you know, he's just like, I wonder where we're going. And he fucking looks it up on his calendar, or, you know, Google that shit. And then the worst case scenario is like, he literally can't find it and you never make it to the gala. And like, oh, too bad. But you actually cultivated a dynamic. You cultivated a dynamic where you were no longer going to be Google Maps for him and his calendar and his address book and his, you know, like you're just like, oh, I don't know. Like, I didn't keep track of that. So I want to underscore again, because I know I've touched on it throughout, but that I've spoken a little bit to the words, and there's literally an energetic component behind it that is, first of all, it actually is the energy of praise. And it's the energy of wanting him, I say him in quotes again, but that person that you want to lead, it's the energy of wanting them to do well. And if you can't do that, it's probably best not to fake it. That's a whole layer of inner work that needs to be done, so that what you bring forward, it's like I've given examples of wording, or I'm talking about this this piece, but the words can only come from that part inside you that's truly chosen. I'm going to take on creating the dynamic over getting exactly what I want, or things happening exactly the way I think they should happen in this moment. I think about this moment I had with my partner. I can't remember, we'd been out on a canoe all day and something happened. He just got a little like fritzed at the end of the day. And I could see him kind of go like, and he was like, well, where should we go to dinner? And I mean, another time I could have just made a decision, and that also would be fine. I really want to say I'm not trying to set like some standard for relationship that's ideal or that everybody want. Like I do not care. Choose but in that time, especially, again, this was like a year and a half ago, it was one of the things I was really wanting to cultivate in our dynamic was was that he choose for us more often, he take the lead more often, or that be more part of our dynamic. And he kind of, and I noticed like my own desire to want to pick it up. And I did that piece internally, but I'd already made this inner choice for myself. And I didn't have to tell him, I didn't have to talk about it. I didn't have to, I was just like, I did all that internally inside, relaxed everything down the front of my body, just rested back. I just looked at him and I was like, oh, I trust you. And like that, he was like, oh, we're going to go here. I don't even know if he would remember that moment, like if he would know what I did. But I knew that he literally could not fail. Like there wasn't something he was going to choose that I'd be like, oh, anything but that. So, and then the other piece I just want to put in here before I complete this, because I went on a lot longer than I intended, but is leadership and the following. They don't always look like the person who's leading knowing everything. So again, my partner, I just love him. So I get to use him as an example all the time. Like, and I just love him. Last year, it wasn't this year for my birthday, it was last year, he initiated, right? Like this is actually leadership. And he sent me a message and he was like, please don't make me figure out what you want for your birthday. And that's actually him taking the lead, right? It doesn't have to always look like knowing everything or getting it right, or like he had to choose the perfect gift and surprise me in just the right way. And like, it was leadership for him to initiate and say, please don't make me figure out what you want for your birthday. And so I followed, rather than being like, oh, why don't you know? Or like, I don't know, anything will be great, when that's not the truth, right? That would be stupid. It would be setting him up to fail. Don't do that. I wrote him back with 3 options that if he got any one of them would like delight me to no end. And then he chose one and I got to be surprised and he didn't have to figure it out. And like, I got to follow his lead and he got to give me what I wanted. And it was like amazing. So, okay, I'm going to check in on just the last comments here. I'm sure there's more to say about this. Really love all of you who've brought your comments and your questions. Like I love the dialogue. So thank you for being with me. Christopher said, praise is something that fills a need that can be addictive. I think that's true and not true. But I think that's on the side of the person receiving it. And frankly, on our own side, I just don't think that we can praise people enough. I think it's a really underutilized skill. And I just really think that we could all praise each other a lot more. And that's just what I believe. And, frankly, I do this with my partner. I do this with people I work with my friends, is both I really try to offer praise more than comes naturally. I was on the phone with my VA today and she's a woman. I did it with her. It was the same thing, was like there were a couple things where I was trying to shift how things were a little bit, or I wasn't quite, it was like some things, but rather than going in and being like, well, let's work on this and I was like, oh, like I just love how this went like this, and this is so great, and I really look forward to how we can keep fine tuning, but I know from where we're at, like I love how you took this and ran with it. And I just gave her praise, because it was true, and I think we're all underpraised. And then I ask for it. So, I've got a couple people in my life where we do that on a regular basis. Like I'll just shoot and be like, could you tell me 3 things you love about me? And I can feel when the people in my life, there's certainly those moments where people are just like a black hole where nothing is going to get in. But there's also just those times when it's like, that would be the thing that would light them up. And I think if we can do that for somebody, then there's really no reason not to. That's how I feel about it. And Christopher said, if a woman can voice what makes her feel more comfortable from a place of vulnerability, it's a call for a man's sobriety. Yes. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to table that because I think that's like a whole other conversation and a really, really important one. So I love that you brought that, Christopher, and I'm not totally going to address it now because it's just so big. Araceli, so nice to see your face. She said, I joined in late, but this was so helpful. I'm glad it was helpful. And yeah, if anything, like as you go through the beginning and things pop up, this goes for all of you, but bring your comments in the replay as well. And I love to dialogue. I just love it. So anyway, thanks for all of you who stuck around to the very end, who were here with me live. If you're watching the replay, you know, bring all those pieces in, and we'll have a text dialogue. And love ya. Ciao.